Thank you for tuning in to the Peoplz and Dragons. If you enjoy the content we provide, then subscribe, like, and maybe join in on the action at www.pndrpg.com. Haven City, an ugly city. Episode 11, Big Tank, Act 2. We see Luperkin sprinting through the streets, evading lunatic civilians and blazing waves of fire raining from the sky like high Excalibur, leaping onto and over vehicles. Looper makes a sharp turn or attempts to, his brick-shaped body crashing into a mailbox, then spots a truck to hide inside of it. The Wang Gang comes riding around the corner and stops yards away from where they last saw Looper, who was hiding in the truck close by. We see the Wang Gang and their evil leader, Noxious Wong, sitting on the bikes, surveying the area with their headphones on, Noxious snapping to the beat. A horde of crazed Haveners come running toward them but are lifted into the air by Noxious Wong's telekinetics, then set ablaze until charbroiled. They are then clumped together, then blown up with telekinetic force. A charred body flies past Looper. Luperkin looks around for an escape route when he meets eyes with a big, burly, wardenary mine worker fiendishly prancing out of the storefront. Looper curses to himself as he knows his cover is about to be blown. He readies his stun baton and mag pistol when all of a sudden an entire squadron of convertibles come flying down the street with street sweepers pointed toward any and all pedestrians, mowing them down with bullet spray. It was none other than the Aurelio Mafia, a crime family known for their chaotic behavior and no regard for innocent life. Amongst several other shooters massacring civilians, we see a 17-year-old girl, Psycho Aurelio, hanging over the passenger door of the convertible in a state of complete euphoria as she rides the wind, her bloodlust being satiated as she wildly sprays her machine guns into crowds of civilians, men, women, and children, maniacs or not, as they drive directly toward the Wang Gang. When the unstable daughter of the Aurelio families, Don, is allowed out on a killing spree, it truly is the end of the world. Noxious Wong, though crazy himself, has always consciously stayed clear of the Aurelio family because of her specifically. With the Wang Gang distracted by the Aurelio family, Looper can be seen scuffling with the big crazy lunatic who is screaming incoherently, "The forest! Don't go in the forest!" and throws a massive punch to Looper's face. At first hesitant to savagely beat up the man who's driven insane, Looper knows that if this goes on any longer, his cover will be blown. Luperkin brings his stun baton down over the maniac's skull, cracking it open. However, driven insane and apeshit, it barely feels it. Looper, having his face grabbed and clawed at, gets both of his hands around the lunatic's head and gouges both of his eyes out with his thumbs, then shortly after slams his head into the truck, neutralizing him. We see Noxious Wong and the gang going to war with the Aurelio crime family. Looper discovers a warp key on the body of the lunatic, then finds the closest warp grid platform to escape through to get back up. Looper makes a run for it, but like a rabid dog triggered when something in its sights begins to run, Psycho comes out of her trance and spots Looper running. Her signature maniacal grin stretches across her face. Looper almost makes it there when he is confronted by Psycho, who lands softly and silently in front of him. Looper recognizes the psychotic Psycho and aims to fire his gun at her while running toward her. Psycho barely evades, bullets grazing her face as she bravely runs toward him. Looper Kin's trigger finger goes numb, followed by his whole arm, then legs, causing him to slow down. This was Psycho's doing, a G-type who could manipulate senses. Psycho leaps at him with a flying kick that Looper is prepared to take to the face, but when it hits like a train, minus the impact. The pain of the hit was unlike anything he's ever felt as her boot crashes into his face. Slightly stunned and numb, Psycho sends another kick into his ribs that Looper is slow to block. She begins to unleash an overwhelming flurry of kicks and punches while evading Looper's slow and lethargic punches. Looper's senses are all going haywire, making it hard to defend. His left eye goes blind as Psycho moves into his blind spot and using her Seryoku fighting style, a form that uses pressure points to break down her opponents while targeting special nerves that can disable mutant powers. Psycho presses a nerve in between his eyes that blinds him completely. She then taps his hip, then kicks him in the gut, sending him stumbling back with numb, noodly legs until he falls. Blocks away, teleporting out of nowhere, a large, hovering, Survey-Day platform appears, taking up the whole block. On it, we see Rasmussen and a small army of elite cultists. Floating above Rasmussen for a brief second, we see a small, yellow-skinned child hovering beside Rasmussen before teleporting away. Rasmussen sets his eyes on the current district and begins unleashing destruction as his platform moves forward. We see wealthy Haveners exiting the warp gate across the street from Looper and soon find out it is most definitely the wrong turn as a group of Aurelio family members begin to shank, stab, and shoot them to death, creating a pile of 6 since they've showed up on the scene. Another warps through the grid, and just as the Aurelio goes to blow their head off, the bullet is sliced in half before it exits the gun, which also is sliced into 2, and soon after the hands, followed by the forearms of the gang member, all in seconds, sliced. Jax finishes stepping through and sends his blade into his target's heart, killing him. The members with the knives go to stab at Jax Erlin, but he deflects their attacks, disarms them simultaneously, and guts them both while walking hastily toward the intersection. A lunatic runs up to him, and he impales his blade into their knee, then elbows them to the ground and continues to walk. Jax is well aware of the cult because they have been attacking innocent people for the last month now. Jax Erlin has been cutting dark corners and taking shortcuts through the city in order to intercept his target, Rasmussen, who is soon approaching like a parade of death. Psycho turns from Looper and sees Jax. She smiles and begins walking toward Jax while shooting at civilians off in the distance. Jax sees this blood-covered little girl walking toward him, killing innocent people with each step, and he immediately dashes toward her with his katana out to stop her senseless killing. Psycho evades Jax's swift slash, as well as the next 7 slashes with ease without even needing to move her legs. Jax goes to thrust, but the elusive Psycho leaps up onto the tip of his blade and flips over Jax while tapping a pressure point on the crown of his head that renders Jax stunned and paralyzed. Jax, confused, has a machine gun pointed at his head by Psycho, but just before she pulls the trigger, a car door comes whizzing in the air, hitting Psycho in the face. We see Looper limping over to the backseat door of another car while firing his pistol, killing 2 oncoming Wang Gang members. He much rather risk friendly car door fire than gunfire, but everyone else can catch these bullets. Looper pulls off the car door and gets ready to throw it, but instead uses it as cover as some Aurelio family members begin firing at him from the windows of buildings. Brave Western warders see their beloved neighborhood protector Looper Kin under fire by Aurelio and Wang Gang members and are encouraged to stand up for their district and take up arms instead of fleeing. We see fights begin to break out in the windows and in the streets as the civilians rally to fight and shed blood for the Western Ward and Looper. Looper sees people fighting for him all around the city. He looks up at a giant atlas sign symbolizing their purchase and takeover of the district. It made him uncertain of what he considered home anymore, until now. Jax gains his motor skills back and slashes at Psycho, who evades again. The two go at it, both with extremely fast reflexes, barely missing each other. Psycho deflects his katana swing with her gun. Jax performs a powerful double slash that cuts the gun in half, but Psycho clashes blades with him using a knife she pulled out of her boot. Psycho is a maniac and loves to toy around with her victims. A wave of fire comes rolling into their direction from the hands of Noxious Wong. Psycho sees this coming, but denies Jax the ability to sense it. Psycho grins and flips out of the way as the roaring blaze engulfs Jax, scorching his flesh and melting his leather coat into his skin. Rasmussen arrives on his floating platform and sees the gang war obstructing the path of his parade of death and chaos. He raises his hands, causing giant, massive Takena tentacles to part the street in half, pushing all vehicles and people aside, some being crushed and killed as cultists fire bolts of dark magic toward the gang members while holding up shields. A massive tentacle bursts out of the ground from under the scorched and unconscious Jax Erlin and a floating Noxious Wong, binding and constricting them both, then breaking them in half. Jax's burnt legs and sword falling to the ground. Psycho leaps at Rasmussen but is caught in the air by a tentacle dangling by her ankle as several Takena bolts casted by his henchmen blow off chunks of her body and limbs. Then her lifeless remains are tossed across the city. Rasmussen clears his path, leaving death and debris, when suddenly, overlooked by hiding behind a scorched car door, Looper Kin leaps up on the platform and tackles Rasmussen to the ground, catching him off guard. Looper jams his pistol into his mouth and fires, pushing Rasmussen's wig all the way back. His cult henchman fire bolts at him, but Looper uses Rasmussen's body as a shield and rolls off of the platform, then under its hovering mass. Looper begins to crawl away, using the passing platform as an opportunity to create space, but is immediately grabbed by Rasmussen's headless body and pulled back under. Looper, freaking out at his headless enemy, he begins to brawl with the sorcerer. Looper, overpowering the sorcerer, clobbers him in the chest with his big tanky fists. Looper escapes from under the platform just in time as bolts start being shot from on the other side. Suddenly, a sharp tentacle shoots through Looper's back and lifts him off of the ground. Looper looks down slowly at the tentacle protruding through his chest, then over at the scenery of destruction within his district. The tentacle slithers up and around his neck and breaks it, then throws Looper's dead body into a heap of burning dead bodies.